Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Reinventing Finance. Before we jump into the episode and we'll introduce my lovely co-host and our guest, we wanted to give a big shout out to ITC Europe and tell you about an exciting event that Ron and I will certainly gonna be attending. If you don't have it in your calendar, InsurTech Connect Europe 2026 happening on May 28th, 29 in Barcelona in the lovely country of Spain.
Exactly. It's a senior level conference for the entire European insurance InsurTech community, for insurers, brokers, MGAs, startups, investors. They all come together for strategic contents and for what I like most, real meetings and next level networking.
Yeah, I mean, I can connect. I've been a big fan since ITC from its beginning, way back when in Barcelona. And what I always liked was you have really interesting main stage events if you want to get what people are willing to share about where the industry is heading and what they're doing. But you have panels, workshops, round tables. You obviously have expos where your typical tech entrepreneurs and solutions are being presented, and it's just a really good place to connect and to mingle. And from personal experience, it is still the best EU event.
Can only confirm this. So if you're shaping strategy, if you're leading innovation, if you're building the future of insurance in Europe, then this event is made for you, and definitely the Barcelona one. Spots are limited.
And check out their website, europe.insurtechconnect.com to register. Hope to see you here. Hi everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our Reinventing Finance podcast. I say our podcast because, as usual, I have the pleasure of not doing this all by myself, but I have my lovely co-host with me. Ron, how are you today?
Hi, everybody. I'm super looking forward to today's show because I'm a big football fan, and I heard today it's all about, well, not all, but a lot about football.
And before anyone is wondering, the topic might be somewhat on the left field for our normal topics, but our guest certainly isn't. So I'm very happy to have Roger again on our podcast, and also a big thank you, as in a previous life, he was actually one who helped us initiate and promote this podcast at DIA, now ITC. So thank you very much for that. I think a big thank you is in order here. But very happy to have you on the show again with this very interesting, and if you bear with us, very related and relevant topic to us insurance nerds out there. But for the very few of you, of those out there, Roger, maybe would you briefly introduce yourself and how did we end up here?
Well, as you briefly mentioned, I've been a strategy consultant for most of my professional life, working for multinational brands in the insurance sector. Think the likes of Allianz, Munich Re, Baloise, NN Group, Zurich, Aegon. Also did a few things in banking. And I basically help them to create new business models using the latest technology. So basically, in my professional life, I'm passionate about innovation and about meaningful change. Well, in my private life, I'm passionate about film and football. I'm playing football since I was 6, and I still am. Every Thursday for practice and every Sunday morning for matches. Nowadays in the 6th regional division, and you can't get any lower, by the way. Still playing with some of my old teammates from over 50 years ago. Unfortunately, I also get to combine my passions from time to time. So that is consultancy in the worlds of sports, of football. And this all started around the turn of the century, when I made a sidestep as an investor in New York in the days of the internet bubble. One of our portfolio companies was a company called Ask Coach Mike. And the founder of this startup, Mike Simon, he was a psychologist. And he had successfully developed life skill programs for the big leagues in America. So think the Major League Baseball, the National Hockey League, and the National Football League. And his programs help children in bad neighborhoods to develop life skills, cooperation, supporting each other, perseverance, self-control, and a sense of responsibility. And although I had been playing football since I was 6, this was actually the first time that I became aware of this unexpected power of sports. And since Ask Coach Mike, I've always done something in the area of football for good, on and off, in consultancy or as pro bono work, alongside, of course, my regular work as a strategy consultant. So I started doing that as a volunteer for a NGO called War Child. They use sports, but also music and theater to take the war out of children. And they do that in war zones across the globe. So currently, for instance, in Ukraine and in Gaza. And they do that with great success. And later on, I worked on the strategy of the KNVB, which is the Dutch DFB, or the FA, as they call it in the UK. And also they're more than football association. And this association overviewed all the social initiatives of the 36 pro clubs in the Netherlands. So that was a fantastic opportunity for me to observe how they are taking on their social role. And that brought me to Feyenoord Rotterdam, where I was able to work with management on developing the strategy of the club. And you can imagine that being able to combine my profession with my lifelong hobby, and those were really some of the most exciting projects in my career. Now, what struck me was that I learned that there are probably over thousands of initiatives that use football to bring positive change. And don't only think of the things that clubs and NGOs are doing, but also of all the initiatives at a grassroots level, so all those amateur clubs around the world. But when I told this to other football fans, friends, teammates, or business contacts, it turned out that the awareness of this hidden power of football is limited. The whole idea of social impact through their favorite sports was really an eye-opener. Now, earlier this week, I was in touch with a board member of a German insurance company. He's also a lifelong fan of VfB Stuttgart. And he had read the book, and he said exactly this. It was an eye-opener. He hadn't been aware of this power of football, but he immediately understood the potential. So it is about the limited awareness on the consumer side, so to say, but also on the corporate side. The funny thing is that when you play football, when you work with banks and insurers, you also come across these banks and insurers in the weekend, but now only on the front of the shirts of the teams that you see on TV. They spend millions of euros on sponsoring clubs, associations, or events, but much less on football-related social projects. And that's a shame, because many of those large corporations really struggle to make their social impact or their social involvement tangible. And that's something that they could easily do through football. And the book shows exactly how you can have both. So that's the aim of the book, to raise awareness for the opportunity among a very wide audience. Football fans, players, club owners, sponsors, basically everyone who can have an impact. And it's targeted at anyone who is passionate about football and who enjoys reading a different kind of football stories. So think of the readers of magazines like Elf Freunde, 12, Ballesteller in Austria, Mundial in the UK. And it's also why it's not a book with case studies. It is football stories in the true sense of the word. So positive stories, fun to read, lots of anecdotes. And what they have in common is that those 11 football stories have a main character who is not just passionate about football, but also discovers along the way, at some point in his career, that he can have a significant social impact with football. So it's not a business book, but between the lines, business leaders can really learn a thing or two, hopefully at least.
Maybe if we go, you've already mentioned it a little bit, but you've said that a lot of them invest into sponsorship, right? But what's the gap missing there? So why would someone, when you said we're investing a lot into logos, right, and events, is there more to it? But it's a shame that they don't do on social. What are some metrics that you think would resonate with some insurers on thinking sponsorship differently, on how to create trust, etc.?
Well, I think it basically starts with the lack of awareness. I think that, for instance, that executive director of this insurance company that I spoke with last week will now have a more open eye. So I think that we don't need to persuade them that much. It's really about creating more awareness of the things that already happen and how they can tag along, rather than thinking about aligning with business objectives, etc., etc. It's more like a missed opportunity that they're just not aware of. It's a completely blind spot.
Is it only this awareness, or are there other effects that then come along beyond sponsorship, beyond just social awareness? If we think about access maybe to new to new communities, trust, employee effects.
There are definitely more opportunities than that. Absolutely. Like on the one hand, football offers a massive opportunity to make sure that their social involvement becomes much more tangible. And they can do that because of the scale of football on the one hand, but also because there are already so many opportunities in place where they can easily tag along. So they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to do anything themselves. These are things that are already in place. So that's good. And secondly, of course, especially with regard to talent, I think that that's probably what you're referring to. Talent is choosing more and more on the basis of the purpose of a company, whether a company is really taking on its social responsibility and acting upon it. And this is also, of course, combined with the visibility that the sports of football has, is something that should at some point be visible in the attractiveness of a company for new talent, and also its power on the labor market.
So I understand. Just being on the front of a jersey is not enough, although they're investing millions, tens of millions, like you just said. It is social awareness. It is much more than this. You also said the book has 11 stories. So if I want to understand this a little bit deeper, this social impact part, which story would be the best to start with if I grab your book and start reading?
In that case, I would say the story around the Homeless World Cup. The Homeless World Cup is an annual football tournament. And they bring together homeless players from around the world already since 2003. It's a street football tournament, so 4 against 4, very fast paced, 2 halves of 7 minutes, a 1 minute break. It's very nice to watch. Each team has 8 players, 4 on the bench, 4 in the field. And when you look at the games, it's just as pure as the matches that are played everywhere on pitches and on playgrounds. Now, in these 22 years, including all the preliminary rounds, 1.3 million people from more than 70 countries have now participated. The local partners of the Homeless World Organization, they go to places where people are, on the streets, in hostels, and they encourage them to play football, just kicking a ball around on a small pitch on the street, just to bring people together. And simply by participating, they gain more self-confidence, a sense of home, connection with others, some structure in their lives. And then the next step is to create sort of individual pathways to get off the streets, find a job, housing, to kick drugs and alcohol, to gain qualification and gradually reintegrate into society. And central to this all, every step is football. And the results speak for themselves. 77% of those 1.3 million people say that joining the Homeless World Cup has significantly changed their lives. So that's really a lot.
It's a great story, but coming from insurance, I'm trying to basically bridge the gap. Why or how could an insurer get involved here without killing this initiative?
Well, I think on the one hand, they can learn a lot because also from the way that the concept is being created, it's really phenomenal in my view. Now, the thing is, it really relies on the passion and the determination of the people of the Homeless World Cup organization, but also of those very diverse range of partners that they have in every country. Okay. And so it's not just the genius simplicity of the whole concept, but also the flexibility for partners to become part, and having respect for those partners in terms of their knowledge, experience, and independence. And that's, I think, where things could go wrong. You know, like the things that I often encounter when working for insurers, and probably we all have that experience, they have the urge to standardize everything or to make their brand more important than the ultimate goal. And this is where things may go wrong if they would be involved and sort of try to own it. At the end of the day, it is about putting the need, in this case, the need of homeless people, at the center, and creating that scale, using those partners to the best of their abilities. And that's that degree of liberty that they should respect.
If I may just kind of dig in there, and I think in your experience, I mean, one obvious way for an insurer to get involved is pay some money, right? Fund it for some form of sponsorship opportunity. That seems like a very obvious way. Now, that's obviously vying for other, let's say, investments, core budgets, etc. What is your experience? Is it more to say you have a conversation with probably someone in Baden-Württemberg if they're VfB Stuttgart fan?
Let's not stress on this team, please.
I would imagine, but yeah, maybe they come from any place in the world. That it's more to say it's an individual passion that someone has related to the sport, and so you now say this is a good thing, and you basically help them funnel something that combines their role in the organization and an individual passion, or I'm sure that's easier. Or is it also to say, hey guys, these type of engagements are much better than your other CSR initiatives, and this is why? Or is it even this is even better than your normal marketing spend, and this is why? So it's not, it's not totally Misi, I get it, but it's basically, is it passion, or is it reallocation of CSR budgets, or can it even be a reallocation of a marketing budget? What is your experience with those conversations? Because I would say that's where the conversation leads very quickly, especially once people, period.
I would always focus on the first two. And the reason is that if you mix it up with marketing objectives, then before you know it, you end up in conversations about ROI. And there's just different kind of metrics that you would like to apply when it's about the effect of social initiatives. Now, looking at personal passion, and that is something that is always good to start things up, but it's always bad for continuity. On the one hand, on the other side, with the social initiatives that are already in place, you always encounter founders who are very passionate and who've been there for a long time. I just mentioned the Homeless World Cup. Mel Young, who initiated this concept, has been around for 22 years already, and he will continue to lead that organization. I came across so many other people, for instance, the club owner and eco-entrepreneur Dale Vince. He took care of the green transformation of Forest Green Rovers. At Feyenoord, one of our favorite clubs, the foundation director, Ton Strooband, has been involved in fan work and community work in Rotterdam from the moment he left university. So on that side, the continuity is covered and the personal passion is covered as well. Now, then the corporate side. For instance, if a corporate decides to actually sponsor one of those initiatives. One example that immediately pops to mind when you ask me this question is what I heard when I was in Madrid visiting MAPFRE, the Spanish insurer. And I was there to discuss with them a program that they have in place in Brazil, where they try to prevent young kids to get into gangs, get into violence. And that was a very effective program, mostly thanks to the fact that the CEO of MAPFRE Brazil was very passionate and a real champion for this program. Now, as you know, in most multinational organizations, people change jobs from time to time. And the moment that he went to his next assignment, immediately the attention for this program within Mapfre dropped. So it is sort of a risk to have a single person within the sponsoring company being the key where this whole program depends on. So that made me rather pragmatic. And I would say, from that perspective, see how you can create a financial flow, donations. Because let's face it, creating or managing social initiatives is not the core business of an insurance firm. And when you look at all those initiatives that clubs and associations already have in place, or NGOs are already have in place, it's their core business. It's not the core business of an insurance firm. So it's much more efficient and much more effective to tie into those initiatives that are already in place, invest in them, and with those investments, you're able to create much more impact, more efficiently and more effectively. And it takes away that hurdle of being dependent on that single person within your organization who could change jobs tomorrow.
That makes sense. Do you then in your discussions find, if we're kind of tapping into the corporate social responsibility budget, do you find that you need to, it's about reallocating that budget? And have you found certain metrics how they benchmark these things? And or is it more how do you basically convince them to allocate additional budget to this? If it's not a marketing ROI, or ideally it outlasts the individual passion of a key decision maker, what are those metrics that people relate to, and what makes the football stories that you've shared in your book interesting from your point of view? I'm not saying better, right? But interesting or relevant versus, I don't know, planting trees or whatever someone else could do in their ESG, corporate social responsibility initiatives.
Well, I think first, and that's the awareness thing, they need to be convinced that football is by far the easiest platform where you can create social impact at scale. It's a universal language. Everyone speaks it. I think that we all have experienced that. Like for instance, when I take a cab, whether it's in New York, Jakarta, or Cape Town, when the driver asks me where I'm from, I say the Netherlands, and immediately they say three things: Cruyff, Gullit, or Virgil van Dijk, depending on the age of the driver. It immediately creates a connection. And I think that during your holidays, wherever it is on the world, you will also experience that if you put a ball somewhere, something happens. People start to play together with each other. They connect. They laugh together. At the scale of football, creating that kind of change is something that is unrivaled by any platform. So that's something that they should be more aware of, that they should be convinced on. Now, there are several situations. On the one hand, there are already various financial institutions that are very much involved in sponsoring clubs, associations, or events. And it's not like moving budget. It's more like putting an amount, a share of that amount that they're currently investing in sponsoring to the social initiatives that are associated with the club, the association, or the event. Round figure, AIA, the Asian insurer that is on the chest of Tottenham Hotspur, they invest around 40 million British pounds every year. Now imagine if they would take a percentage of that amount and put it into social initiatives that are run by Tottenham Hotspur. That would really make an impact. And it's not about moving, it's more about including. So that's one thing I would like to add. And the second thing is that most of the financial institutions that we all work for, they already have their foundations with all sorts of social initiatives. So they're already investing a lot. And this is also where they can create new economies of scale And well, to give you an example, there's a bank, and this bank is very much into improving financial literacy among young kids. And they do that in a program. But if you look at it, it's really ad hoc visits, one-off of a bank employee going to primary school and talking about finance. Now, at the same time, this bank is also sponsoring a club, and this club is engaged in creating equality in chances for kids in bad neighborhoods. They go out with a team of 50 coaches to those primary schools every day, and they reach around 4,000 kids every day. Now, imagine if you would combine that. It's a missed opportunity if you would not. And and that's basically the kind of things that they already do just by looking at their current portfolio of activities within their foundation, and how they could be leveraged much more effectively because they can use a platform that has such an impact.
So sorry, Bron, go ahead.
I wanted to come back to what you mentioned at the very beginning, CSR in marketing. And now, Roger, you brought this AIA example, and I want to bring it a little bit closer to our home here. Let's talk about Allianz. Let's talk about Bayern München. We have the Allianz Arena. For me, this is clear marketing. But we also have Allianz lighting up the Allianz Arena in pink during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And we have the initiatives of Allianz with the women's team at Bayern München. So my question would be, for all the insurers who just see the marketing or the CSR, where are the synergies? How can they play it out right?
You live in Munich. I'm there quite often. I've worked for Allianz. You know the company as well. I think what they're doing with the women's team of Bayern Munich is so close to their heart. Looking at the company, and I've been around since 2015, I think. I noticed that gender equality is so much top of the agenda. And this is also something that you can see in the way that they have organized. 4 out of 9 management board members are women. So that's quite a lot. And women make up 40% of the company's leadership. So they really have a commitment to gender equality. And you can say that it's really part of who they are. It's how they work and also how they make money. They're not the only partner with Bayern Munich, by the way, but also from the same perspective with clubs like Juventus and Rapid Wien. And their whole idea is that if we can increase the number of role models in society for gender equality, that would be a perfect thing to do. And they use the football clubs as a way to get there, as a vehicle to get there. And in the introduction, Nick mentioned going out to visit a game, a women's game between Bayern and HSV. Most probably a lot of young girls who play football, when they come into a stadium with the size of the Volksparkstadion, with 57,000 people on the stands, they will certainly realize that also they are able to reach that kind of level. It opens up opportunity. The players on the field are their role models, and it will help them to become more confident about their own possibilities. So that's definitely something that works for them, and why I think that the way Allianz is doing it is really a best practice in this area. They've started with the partnership of the women's team of Bayern in 2013. And at that time, women's football was not on anyone's radar. And they recently extended the contract to 2033. So that is a sponsoring contract of 20 years on a row. And that's really a commitment. Does this sort of...
So what would be the advice for the other ones? Let's take Ergo, for example. They're sponsoring they're one of the sponsors for the German national team. But yeah. I don't see comparable involvement, like this holistic approach like Allianz does. So, and we don't have to focus on Ergo. We can take any other but AIA, because AIA seems to do it right as well. So one of the other insurers, what would be the right way to do it? Okay, let's then AIA first.
Now, like the AI is doing stuff, but mostly in Asia. And it really centers around youth football, clinics and things like that.
But that's the Indonesian thing, right?
No, it's not just in Indonesia. It's across Southeast Asia. Okay. So that's, but like I've seen that those kind of examples too often. Also, like Inter Milan has a program like that. They fly out with 2 team members to Africa. They do a little match against kids. They hand out shirts and they fly back again, and nothing happens.
Is that cosmetics or is that credible?
Well, like I think it's also not knowing exactly how to create impact. So it's the knowledge factor, and that's why what I mentioned, I think it's much wiser to tap into the platforms that are already in place. And I think that, for instance, what Allianz is doing with Bayern Munich management really knows how to run football and how to use football for gender equality. Combining that with the knowledge that Allianz has, that really makes a difference. And you can also see that, in my view, at least, they never said that to me, but when I look at the composition of the team of Bayern Munich, I only see players who are very vocal, who really take a stance. So take, for instance, Pernille Harder and Magda Eriksson. They have a strong voice when it comes to the rights of the LGBTQ community. Lea Schüller, she's also part of the German national team. She had a lengthy interview in Vogue last year, and she took that opportunity to discuss gender equality. Then there is a player from Austria. She works on a UEFA campaign to promote football among young girls. So there's a lot of things that these players do that are quite exceptional. So they tend to select personalities rather than just only good players. They probably both. So now, getting back to other insurance companies, I think it's about the questions that they don't ask themselves yet. That could be, for instance, okay, now we're sponsoring the German Football Association. What kind of social initiatives do they have in place? And what can we do as an insurance company to tap into those social initiatives? So that could be one thing. Or suppose that this insurance company would have a focus in their social activities. How can we suggest the German Football Association or motivate them to also include this social initiatives in their programs, and see how this can be leveraged throughout the thousands of clubs that are part of the German Football Association? So there are different ways to approach this, but these questions, they're just not asked. And that's, I think, the key issue.
So if and this was something, so what I'm learning, I'm trying to paraphrase what I've heard, and just want to make sure that I'm not overinterpreting something or wrongly interpreting something. Basically, what you're saying is, number one, do not conflate CSR and marketing. Is not the same thing. Don't try it. You'll get into, we're not claiming that. If you go into CSR, make sure that it can be initiated with a passion, but make sure it's durable after that individual passion might move on to a new, role or something. But the real, I think, insight that, at least for me, is to say, it's almost like effective, in a way, effective altruism, to say, if you want to do something good, rather than trying to recreate the wheel locally and doing a very specific thing yourself, but without a big impact, pick what's already there. Football is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Everyone understands it. Football clubs and sports, they're so ingrained in most societies, certainly in our Western European societies, that not leveraging that, and when in doubt, potentially be maybe weaker on the specificity of your goal. You mentioned literacy. Why would someone do financial literacy? The ultimate goal is not financial literacy, it's equality, right? That's ultimately what people want. It's not to pass an exam at the end. And so maybe partner with a club who already goes in there and also focuses on equality, potentially with a different measure set. Is that a fair kind of summary in terms of advice, or is there something to add to it? What you would advise anyone within an insurance company, and ideally without a passion for football, and just to say, listen, this will give you the best social bang for your buck, because that's what I'm hearing.
Yes, there's one thing to add there, and that's the fact that, and that's traditional marketing thinking. Companies always want something for themselves. Mm-hmm. They want something they can own, which helps them to differentiate from competitors. And this is a thought that doesn't apply to social impact. And that's the thing that they really need to be much more aware of than that they are doing now. Do you understand a bit what I mean? Should I elaborate a bit on that?
No, listen, I think it's clear in principle. I think what that means in practice, could be different things, is how much you influence something, what you get for your money, whether you have another competitor on the same program, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the message is pretty clear, I would say.
And it's basically, and this is also where we can use a football metaphor. Just like in football, it's not about scoring yourself, but it's about winning as a team. And in football, that's obvious. But when you look at how most sponsors look at social initiatives, it's almost the opposite. They really want that exclusivity so that they can claim it. And that's basically where they need to get away from. And because it's odd and even counterproductive. So why would you want to own impact? It's strange, right? If you think of it. And why would you exclude others to contributing to impact? That's strange. So rather than focusing on the exclusivity, they should value being early adopters or being getting the perception of thought leaders. And that should be the crucial elements to develop their credibility and their brand love, so to say. Also, because looking at exclusivity, that only leads to less impact overall. And it's strange because in football, it is common for players from rival clubs to come together and play on the same side, from the same national team, for instance, for that greater purpose. It's nothing more different than that. If you want to play the World Cup, you have a team with people from Bayern and from Dortmund and from Leipzig all together in one team, and that apparently works. And the same applies here. Major brands should really set aside their competition feeling to collectively achieve that higher goal and to create really social impact. One of the people I spoke with he's a former minister in the Netherlands, and he also wrote a couple of books on football. So it's a bit of a strange combination. It's Peter Winsemius, he's called, and he used another football metaphor. He said, "The right goal is never your own goal." And I thought that was really a wise one, especially when you look at this.
Yeah.
And the strange thing is that among clubs, there's already a lot of collaboration when it comes to social initiatives. So, for instance, there are a lot of kids that have to deal with obese, and they would really favor from a more healthy lifestyle. And 10 clubs from different countries in Europe, they all work together to create a program, to learn from each other, to make their programs more effective and more efficient. So, and it's not just on fighting obese, it's also on fighting racism. It's about environmental changes. So there's a lot of things that clubs are already working on together. Now the challenge is that sponsors should do that as well, to have that higher goal as their primary concern, and not just the exclusivity.
Understood. Conscious of time, gentlemen. Is there something that we weren't able to touch on Roger, that you want to share with the audience? Any kind of additional advice or topic that we didn't cover before we wrap up?
I have
Well,
one last question before,
please,
but please, your add-ons first.
Ron, you first.
Maybe you answer my last question already. My last question would be, okay, I learned a lot about the CSR versus marketing, and I'm still struggling basically to bring both of them together. So I'm always taking the perspective of an insurer. And if I have an insurer that says, okay, we did this, we're on the front of the jersey, we pay a ton of money to be there, but that's probably not enough. We want to venture further and get to real impact. What would probably be the hardest trade-off for them, the hardest internal trade-off, and how can they make this step going beyond?
Well,
just as a very concrete advice for insurers in Austria and Germany. And
well, I would say that on the one hand, those insurers already have those social initiatives in place, and they already have the sponsorship in place. So the trade-off is more, if you would combine the two, it would increase complexity for them. And I think that's the thing that they will think about at least a bit longer. And then there's always people who are sort of risk averse, and they will use the opportunity to ask things like, okay, suppose that we would sponsor initiatives that help refugees to participate in football. Wouldn't we take a political stance then, and perhaps even alienate ourselves from part of our clients? Or, for instance, standing up for LGBTQ rights. Would that bring our position in some of our key markets into danger? That's something that is very actual currently. So those kinds would pop up, but I think that many of the examples in the book show that fortunately many clubs and companies are not hindered by these kinds of assumptions, and show that they can really support social initiatives, and apparently they don't perceive those risks. So the trade-off, that's also something that after reading the book could be something that could be reduced. So that would basically, and also in combining the two, combining marketing and social initiatives. Having spoken to Allianz, they actually use measures to know how the social initiatives that they are supporting are performing. So they track standard measures like exposure, reach, and engagement. They do that on a monthly basis. But they also conduct an annual return on marketing analysis that tracks key ROI indicators. And that also includes brand advocacy studies with measures, among other things, the social and environmental consciousness, the reputation potential, and the actual impact of each partnership. So they have found a way to actually measure the impact also using the traditional metric, but don't ask me how they do this exactly.
Roger, before we wrap up, anything else we want to cover? Anything that we didn't, and that you think is sensible for our viewers, listeners to pick up on?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, we really discussed the business side of the things that are in the book, but the essential is that the book includes 11 unique portraits from players and a club owner to fans, a football photographer, and even the owner of a food stall. And it's full of anecdotes about the personal journeys and the adventures they have. And what unites them is their understanding that football means far more than just a game. But the stories are really nice to read, at least that's what I've heard so far. These are stories about the shirts that are swapped with Luis Suarez, Michael Owen, the mission of Bayern Munich's Georgia Stanway, Pernilla Harder, Julia Gwynn, or for instance how a musician like Massive Attack's Robert Del Naya got involved with a club, how an award-winning photographer is working for Chelsea. So there are different stories that are really football stories. When you read them, hopefully you pick up also a few things about how you can leverage football to create much more impact than you do today.
Roger, thank you very much for your time. Awesome. Ron also, and everyone for listening. And are looking forward, pick up the book. We'll share it in our show notes, where you can get the book and you get the full title. So you don't need to note it down now. And thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Also from Munich.
Thank you for having me.